Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of 36 Lessons, an Elder Scrolls lore podcast. I'm your host Andrew, and I'm joined by my friend and fellow loreologist Rory.
Hello, everyone. We have a really good, interesting episode prepared this week. Last week, the many weeks ago that our first episode aired, in between then and now, we've received lots of really good feedback from the people over at our test lore and our real-life friends as well on what kind of topics they want to see and how they want to see them covered. And we're definitely going to... We've made a large master list of all the suggestions. So we're definitely going to be making our way through it as early as possible once we get sort of the basic lore stuff out of the way.
For this week, we've thoroughly ignored all of that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So if there was anything in particular that you wanted, it's not this week, but it will come eventually. But we wanted to make sure that a couple major topics were out of the way first, and the first one really that came to our minds was taking care of the lore behind all the guilds that you find in if you play, Skyrim or Oblivion or even Morrowind.
Yeah, and I think we should start with one of the best first.
Yes, absolutely. Start strong.
So we're going to be looking at the Assassin's Guilds, which are the Morag Tong and, more importantly, the Dark Brotherhood. Or I guess more relevantly to most of the games.
More relevantly to most people in our audience, certainly. So, if you've played Oblivion and Skyrim, you've definitely encountered the Dark Brotherhood because they have significant quest lines in both games. And if you're maybe more of an old school fan, you might know more about the Morag Tong.
Yeah, the Morag Tong is the Assassin's Guild you join in Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. However, in Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion and Elder Scrolls 5 Skyrim, you join the Dark Brotherhood.
Yes, and in certainly in the case of the Dark Brotherhood, there's a lot of lore that gets glossed over in-game that just gets sort of alluded to. That's really fundamental Elder Scrolls lore that goes all the way back to the Elder Scrolls creation myth.
Yeah, I guess in some ways the games don't... I guess the main storylines in the games for the Dark Brotherhood Guild, anyway, don't necessarily do it justice in terms of all the lore surrounding it.
Yes, and to be fair to them, I guess I don't know how you could do that level of content justice, just like in in-game action. But but we want to cover some of the extra stuff because there's a lot of additional content there.
Yeah. So I don't know where you'd like to start, Rory. Do you want to start way back at the beginning, or do you want to start at the Morag Tong and work our way up? Actually, let's do the intro first.
Okay, sure. Let's intro, yeah. So I think it's actually we're gonna have to dodge around in a couple different directions no matter how we do this. So I think probably the most logical way to do this is to start sort of at the very beginning.
So in the way back times.
The way back times or any of this Nern nonsense. The proper Elder Scrolls creation myth, which in and of itself will have certainly its own episode where we'll go more into detail.
Oh, absolutely. If we want to get into the creation myth on its own, that's an hour by itself. So
exactly, yeah. So I what I want to do is make sure we give it in broad strokes and then highlight the parts that are going to be relevant for the Dark Brotherhood and the Morag Tong.
Yep. So yeah, do you want to go ahead?
Okay, sure. So in the very beginning of Elder Scrolls, you don't really have, the gods, the Aedra and the Daedra that you're familiar with if you've played the game and know a little bit about the lore. You have these like primal forces, being Anu and Padme. And like I say, they're not gods in like the conscious like way that we often think of gods in a lot of the lore you might explore. They're more like forces. But those forces do. I'm going to use this is like quite existential, like quite unusual. But those forces, for lack of a better term, just to sort of make my way through this, they birthed other forces, and the force that was birthed from Padme was called Sithis. Padme and Sithis aren't fundamentally, I guess they're fundamentally the same thing, but they are distinct. Worth noting that they are distinct. One sort of predated the other.
Yeah, I think we should say that it's Anu that represents order, and Padme that represents chaos. I think. Yes,
exactly. Yeah, and this the words Andrew used are very important there because it's not good and evil.
Right.
This is totally like going above those concepts. It's just they're forces of order and forces of chaos. It's not good or bad, or it doesn't have any sort of morality whatsoever. It's just associated with good and bad by the time we bring it down to the world that we encounter them in.
Yes.
So like I say, Sithis was, I'll say, birthed from Padme, and correspondingly, Anoiel was birthed from Anu. And these still aren't the kind of gods that you're used to, the Aedra and the Daedra. You need to go one more layer down, to Auriel. Is that how it's pronounced? I've always wondered about that.
Yeah, I've always pronounced it Auriel.
Yeah, to Auriel, who was who came from Anoiel, and then that's when you start getting into what we would actually consider to be like Aedra, I guess conscious deity, the Aedra and the Daedra. Yeah. So while it's sort of tempting to think of the Aedra and the Daedra as the first things, it would be. It does miss a great deal.
Yeah.
And in terms of what Sithis actually is, there's a lot of dispute on the specifics, and on the wants of Sithis, whether Sithis actually has wants. There is sort of an idea, which is prevalent in the Elder Scrolls, that Sithis is has motivations and has things that I'll say, wants.
Right. Sithis also kind of just represents the absence of everything.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, the void as it is in the cosmology of the Elder Scrolls universe. So there's like and that's the essence of what Sithis is. Sithis is the representation of nothing, but the people in the Elder Scrolls universe have assigned or believe that there is a consciousness or motivation there. But this stuff is all very sort of fuzzily defined, and there's different accounts of all of it.
Yes. Like all of Elder Scrolls.
Like everything in Elder Scrolls, yeah. So I wanted to get that out of the way so we could get to what Sithis is, but also it's very important, once we have the sort of layers. We have the Anu and Padme layer, then we have the Anoiel and Sithis layer, and then we have the Aedra and Daedra layer below that. It's not hard to think about why some people in the Elder Scrolls universe might revere Sithis, given his
Daedra?
Above the others, yeah, because of his just sort of having come first.
Right.
Like we say, it's mostly what really gives Sithis its intrigue is what people do with it, whether people associate Sithis with evil or whether they worship him. The Elder Scrolls creation myth is, it's been assigned importance by the people in the Elder Scrolls universe, kind of like, our very own, ideas here on planet Earth.
Right. And different things mean different things to people.
Exactly.
The same thing mean different things to different people. So
yeah, definitely.
very,
and
Yeah.
It's really important that we get from Sithis to the Daedra because one of the Daedric princes, who we mentioned in the last episode, Mephala, is a really important critical element of the Assassin's Guilds, all of them.
Yes, and that would be Mephala.
Yes,
Yeah.
the Mephala is the Daedric prince of. I always forget the specific wording they use, but it's like murder and plots and sex or something of that effect.
Yeah, and she. Well, I say she, but Daedra don't really have gender.
No, they don't.
Although some Daedra, like Azura, always represents themselves as female.
Yes, there are a couple that are consistent entirely.
Yeah. But Mephala is not at all consistent.
No, not at all consistent. Although we'll likely be using she.
Yeah.
We generally have a pronoun we select with each of these. And go with that. So we'll be referring to Mephala as she, but understand that we are sort of making an intentional mistake there.
Yeah.
I
forget where I was going when I started that sentence.
I guess we can lead now into the Morag Tong.
Yeah. Oh, it was Boethia last time, Rory. Remember we couldn't remember the name of the Daedra who had that quest? It was Boethia. Of course it was Boethia.
I don't remember. Did we forget something and forget who one of the Daedra was?
Yeah. We were trying to remember the Daedric prince of the quest in Oblivion where you had to go into their realm and defeat a bunch of their champions.
Boethia.
Yeah.
Boethia. Yeah, okay. That should have probably been a little more obvious to us.
It was the only one. It was the only one we didn't guess.
So now I guess we can lead into the Morag Tong a little bit. Would you like to take over that section?
Sure. So the Morag Tong they're basically the first Assassin's Guild to crop up on Tamriel. And the Dark Brotherhood actually eventually branches off from the Morag Tong. The Morag Tong started way back in the First Era, if I'm correct there. It may have been back in the Dawn Era, but I'm going to say the First Era here.
The First Era is where it becomes significant.
Right. So these guys were a legal Assassin's Guild. So basically, as a means of preventing all-out war between factions of the Chimer, which are the elves that eventually became the Dunmer.
Mm-hmm.
In an effort to prevent all-out war, this Morag Tong Guild was created. So you'd put out a writ of execution on somebody that you really don't agree with, you want to gone. Mm-hmm. And the Morag Tong would go kill them, and it'd be legal in the eyes of society.
Yes. You can kind of see where this might go wrong if you're thinking about legal Assassin's Guild and society. You could kind of see how it might quickly unravel if the society that approves them is worried for their own safety. Sort of a bound to fail story, I think.
Yeah.
Because, like you say, they're primarily known for their First Era activity. When they assassinated one of the emperors.
Yeah, Emperor Riemann III.
Yes, and the Riemann dynasty is a really important set of figures in the story of the Elder Scrolls. The last name of the dynasty is actually Cyrodiil, which, as many of you will know, comes up quite a lot in Elder Scrolls.
Yeah, it might be a name you've heard once or twice.
Yeah.
So eventually, these guys got really overconfident. I guess overcompetent as well.
Yeah, too good at what they did.
So I guess the downfall of many things is hubris, and these guys, after killing after a high profile murder, actually wrote the name Morag Tong on a wall in the victim's blood. People didn't like this.
Yeah, that was that. Left a bad taste in people's mouth, and it was very hard for the Morag Tong to function, and certainly, legitimacy is another thing, to function legitimately within the empire, whichever empire was present, and also the Morag Tong was disturbed by a variety of problems. And one of those problems, which is certainly very significant for this episode, is that there was a faction of the Morag Tong that disagreed with the way the Morag Tong was functioning.
Yeah, I should say that the Morag Tong, a large part of their belief is the worship of Mephala.
Yes, yeah, that's a very important element, and that's where so somewhere along those lines is where the Splinter faction, which came to be known as the Dark Brotherhood, sort of evolves, but there's a lot of conflicting ideas about what their precise issue was with the way the Morag Tong was functioning.
Right.
It's not been made clear. Some people, I think they were supposedly Mephala, like hardcore loyalists, and then the Morag Tong, I think, sort of almost rescinded their official worship of Mephala.
Yes, because the Dark Brotherhood's, I guess, most important deity is Sithis, as opposed to Mephala.
Yes, exactly, and there's also one rather interesting theory that the Dark Brotherhood actually was an offshoot of the Thieves Guild, instead of being a splinter group from the Morag Tong. But I think it's only a small lore reference, and it not the prevailing opinion that I've heard from lore people when they talk about this issue. So I just defer to the majority in that case, I think. I guess we can get now into the specifics. Like the Morag Tong are a very interesting group, but they've been relative, they don't have a lot of exposure.
Right. So the Morag Tong operated primarily in Morrowind.
Yes.
Legally,
exactly.
like I said. And the Splinter Group, the Dark Brotherhood, operated entirely outside of the law.
Yes, exactly.
And by doing that, they were quickly able to spread across Tamriel.
Yeah,
because governments didn't have to sanction their use, right? So
exactly, it's an easier sell.
Yeah, exactly.
So it makes sense that the Dark Brotherhood would arise, and also, there's just less rules involved. The Dark Brotherhood certainly has their own, code of conduct, and appropriate behavior, but none of that has to do with the legality. Which, as you know, if you've played any Elder Scrolls game, what's legal and what's okay and what's not okay in any sub-empire in this world changes on a dime. So by having their own set of rules, they can just worry about those, and they don't have to worry about anyone else's. So I guess, so yeah, it's important that Sithis, we mentioned, is a deity of the Dark Brotherhood. They worship Sithis above all things. They also have a rather more peculiar worship structure, which involves a figure they call the Night Mother.
Right.
And that's a very... There's a lot of different stories on what the Night Mother is. Some people believe it's Mephala, which goes along with the theory that the Dark Brotherhood was upset when members of the Morag Tong lost faith in Mephala. Other people, I think there's this like sort of tale about a Dunmer woman who was like a wife of Sithis, and she had a bunch of kids who she killed for Sithis, or something like that. But that's I don't know. When I heard that story, that always struck me more as like one of those sort of Elder Scrolls folk tales, as opposed to an actually like lore substantiated thing.
Yeah, I think we do see the skeletons of the children in one of the games. Either
We see skeletons, but I don't know if that's like a if that's like an allusion to the story, or if that's like I don't know if that's like supporting evidence, or if it's just like an
you don't know
evidence
if that is the myth or it's the result of the myth.
Exactly. Yeah. That could be. Oh, those are the children from the myth, or it could be this is like kind of like a shout out to the myth.
Yeah.
Rather gruesome shout out at that. But the Dark Brotherhood is a really interesting group, not just because they worship a sort of peculiar set of deities, but they have a really rich and detailed history, much more detailed than that of the Morag Tong. Like we can follow it a little more directly. And I guess, well, one of the things that interests me most about the Dark Brotherhood, I'm not sure about you, but is they all the changes of leadership it's gone through and all the conflicts it's had. It's sort of got its own like sort of House of Cards operation there.
Yeah.
You'll know if you played. I think most people listening to this are familiar with the Dark Brotherhood from Skyrim, and you're aware that in Skyrim, one of the lines of the Dark Brotherhood is that there's this kind of rebellion against the traditional tenets that they have, their rules.
Yes, because at the time of Skyrim, the Dark Brotherhood is all but destroyed. There's not much left of them.
Exactly.
And there's really nothing left of the Morag Tong at that point either.
No, certainly not.
Because when the Red Mountain explodes on the island of Vardenfell in Morrowind, the Morag Tong basically dissolves. Morrowind just descends into chaos, and the Morag Tong dissolves. Although we do see them a bit later on in the Dragonborn expansion pack. But it's really interesting that their story is so fragmented, but the Dark Brotherhood details it really well. And there's if you played the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, that quest line centers around another power struggle within the Dark Brotherhood, and I think that that's where we get to see the most Dark Brotherhood lore unfold before our eyes. Which is really, I've spoken about it before. It's my favorite quest line in the games, and it's got a really interesting take on the politics of the Dark Brotherhood. Yeah. And
there's a couple interesting things that the Dark Brotherhood has with the society as well. Like the shadow scales was always an interesting concept to me. Certain Argonians who were born under the sign of the Shadow would be given to the Dark Brotherhood as assassins for training. We actually meet a few of them in the games. If you don't know about the sign, I guess I should mention it just because it's worth noting. If you played Skyrim, you might not know about the signs, being born under certain signs.
Because that was a feature taken out of the game.
Yes, which is like kind of... I don't like that. Like, there's no way around it. I don't like less character building. I understand that a big point of Skyrim and the way it's designed is to give you freedom of choice and not lock you into anything.
Yeah. Well, the signs in Skyrim were replaced by the standing stones, which allowed you to switch them up mid playthrough. But in past games, you were always locked into your choice.
And I like that. I like that extra character building, and also it just acknowledges an important concept in the lore.
Yeah. A sense of permanence is always important in RPGs.
Exactly.
I think.
Yeah, and a sense of your place in what's happening, and I think that's the biggest thing that's missing in the games from the Dark Brotherhood quest line is a sense of what you're actually a part of. because, like we say, it has this long, complicated history, which goes all the way back to the creation myth. And I think it would be, it'd be nice if we got a sense of, the magnitude of what you were dealing with, because the Dark Brotherhood sort of just, if you don't know any better, especially in Skyrim, it just sort of seems like a small band of criminals.
Yeah.
Well,
not
the
worship of Sith is much less prominent in the Skyrim version.
Yeah, it is.
In Oblivion, well, in Skyrim, it's much more focused on the Night Mother herself. Whereas in Oblivion, it feels much more a religious cult than an assassin organization for money.
Yes, which I think is more true to its origins.
Right.
Because I doubt that, just on a personal level, I guess, not referring to any lore, I doubt that the reason they split off is because they weren't making enough cash or something like that. I'm sure there was something a little more principled behind it. But yeah, and hopefully, that that kind of thing gives a sense of what's happening. But there's lots more in the Dark Brotherhood. Like we say, the Morag Tong were prominent in the First Era, and if you look at the distance of time between when you encounter the Dark Brotherhood in Oblivion and that First Era, there's quite a lot there.
Yes.
It's mostly quiet, but there is stuff there in which a lot, lots of things will be happening. And I think that's really important. I'm not sure how much we want to get into the Dark Brotherhood's political structure, but it's got it's rigidly hierarchical.
Yeah, I mean we can speak on it.
Okay, sure. Well, yeah, like we say, always at the top you have your Sithis and your Night Mother, and then you have these. Now I'm definitely going to screw up these names now. You have
You've
different
got your
assignments.
listener.
You have your listener, who's I shouldn't say designated, because it's not designated by any people, right? It's as I recall, the listener is always chosen by the Night Mother.
Yes, I believe you're right.
To be her liaison to the group, to communicate, and the Night Mother communicates only directly with the listener. But then you also have the is it called it's the Black Hand, right?
It's the speaker is the. Doesn't it go listener, speaker?
Well, yeah, listener, speaker. Yeah, well, there's the speaker, and I forget the precise responsibilities of the speaker, but I believe the speaker. I remembered. I got it now. Sorry, the speakers are the other members of the Black Hand, the leadership group.
Ah, okay.
Yes, yeah. So it's listener and speakers, and so those are your 5 members. The Black Hand is a 5-member group, and it's made up of your speaker, or your listener, and your 4 speakers.
Right.
And those are the leadership group of the Dark Brotherhood. And that in and of itself has had its own, particular controversy. The Dark Brotherhood has not been afraid in its history to what they call purify its membership, which means exactly what you would think it might mean.
So we see this is a major plot point in the Dark Brotherhood questline in Oblivion.
Yes, yeah, the Oblivion really not afraid to delve into the politics of this guild, which I think is a nice touch.
Yeah,
and so you actually you as the player character actually have to carry out a purification on orders of the Black Hand, or the rule, which I say again is sort of the ruling council of the Dark Brotherhood. And they've done this. They've done a couple purifications. There's that one in Oblivion, and there's another one. There was a splinter, there was some vampire rival group to the Dark Brotherhood, and I forget. Do you remember what they're called?
No.
I'm just gonna look because I gotta find out. 'Cause it's gonna drive me insane. The Crimson Scars.
Oh, right.
There they are. Yeah, the Crimson Scars, which were a group of the Dark Brotherhood, which wanted everyone to become vampires, and that didn't go over too well. So they killed them.
Right.
It didn't work. And vampirism does have a history with the Dark Brotherhood. I suppose Valtieri is one of the most more prominent members of the Dark Brotherhood in the Oblivion quest line.
Yeah, and in the Skyrim quest line, you've got is it
the little girl? Yes, yeah, I think that's right. Yeah. So there is a history there, and vampirism itself is its own very interesting topic. In the Elder Scrolls lore, it's I mean, to a certain extent, it's more or less what you might expect. It's not that different from the Buffyverse take on vampirism,
right?
But it's interesting, honestly, mostly from a gameplay perspective, because it introduces an interesting new gameplay mechanic. And for that alone, I've chosen vampirism on numerous playthroughs. And yeah, I think that... Is there anything in particular that you wanted to say about the Dark Brotherhood or the Morag Tong?
Well, we can get into how much it sucked for the Brotherhood after Oblivion.
Yeah.
Between Oblivion and Skyrim.
That's a good point. Yeah, we should at least mention that. Because that history should be detailed. So there is the Brotherhood. It seems to be more or less thriving in Oblivion. Obviously, there's issues that you solve throughout the game,
right?
But it's a prominent organization. The Sanctuary is just in a city in Cheydinhall, right? It's like it's just sitting there, like no one cares it's there. There's like a church across the way, right? Like it's like, all right, that's just the Dark Brotherhood house, I guess.
Yeah, you've got this highly illegal organization, not showing much tact when it comes to their presence throughout the provinces.
Certainly not. Yeah. And they have really low standards for for entry. To be honest, you just have to kill someone to get a visit.
Yeah.
That's pretty. Like, now, obviously, the actual workings of the Dark Brotherhood are a little harder to deal with. You have to be good at killing people to make it very far. But, you're right. They're open but hidden. It's kind of like everyone's pretending they're not there.
Yeah.
But they are thriving in their own way. That did not hold.
No. So you can thank the Great War for that. The Great War being that's the war between the Thalmor and the Empire. Is that right?
So that's I think like it's some the Thalmor politics are really tricky. I'm not sure if it was considered an official Thalmor action or an action of the Aldmeri Dominion. Yeah.
Okay.
But suffice to say, it was a bunch of high elves who don't like other people.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're right. But you can also look at it as being elves were once great. They were these immortal beings, essentially. Yeah. And when these other races started taking things over, the elves got the elvish society got much worse.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Oh yeah. The story is a little more sympathetic than I'm making it out to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I think that the Thalmor, and sort of by extension the Aldmeri Dominion, are a very intriguing group of people. And for something that I've never seen a word brought up so much and dealt with less than the word Thalmor in Skyrim. It's like it's brought up all the time. they keep talking about the Thalmor, and you do see the Thalmor,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know. I found the presence and the exploration of the Thalmor to be a little underwhelming.
Yeah, well, the Thalmor themselves are this doomsday cult, essentially. The Old Married Dominion might be fighting for, not necessarily elven supremacy, but trying to get back some of the good times.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
the Thalmor are, they are the Nazis.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, they're a very very intriguing group.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the Great War. Sorry, carry on with the Great War affecting the Brotherhood.
Well, yeah, as the Great War, as the Aldmeri Dominion swept across Tamriel, the Brotherhood was essentially wiped out.
Yeah.
Because they didn't align with any of the Thalmor beliefs or any of that. So
Yes, exactly.
They were wiped out with the rest of the opposing forces.
Yes, and killing. Correct me if I'm wrong, but so the Dark Brotherhood, when they decide to kill someone, it's because they were called upon to kill them, or with special instances, they internally decide to kill somebody. Like if someone's, if they feel someone is damaging a member within is damaging the Brotherhood, they kill them.
Right.
But I don't know if the Dark Brotherhood has any sort of revenge clause. Like if someone sees a Dark Brotherhood guy killing someone and they kill that Dark Brotherhood member, as far as I know, there's no repercussions.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. As long as somebody doesn't perform the Black Sacrament against somebody else, the Dark Brotherhood more or less stays out of it.
Exactly, which means that in terms of certainly I think organizations of assassins are certainly not go-to targets, but they also, in terms of killing a bunch of Dark Brotherhood members, you could see why that might happen, because there's potentially fairly minimal consequences. They're not that common. They're big, but they're not that big.
Yeah.
Right? It's not an army.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So it's probably, in terms of groups of people to wipe out that are prevalent, the Dark Brotherhood might be one of the easier ones.
Yeah.
Which is very ironic.
Yeah, I mean, if you got some agents inside of the guild, this is not canon at all. But if you got some agents inside of the guild, I think you could do some damage that way.
Yeah, exactly. So by the time this Great War was done and they had gone through and wiped out, because remember the Dark Brotherhood exists in sanctuaries. So if you find those sanctuaries, you can pretty much wipe them out.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's just very little remaining of the Dark Brotherhood at all by the time you encounter them in Skyrim. I think it'll actually be, I'm not sure, there's obviously, the potential for further games and future storylines and even going again into the past like the Elder Scrolls Online did.
Yeah.
But it would be very interesting to see if they can even hang on it's not by the end of the Skyrim Dark Brotherhood questline, now the Dark Brotherhood is in tip-top shape.
Yeah. They are in much better shape than they were, though.
Definitely.
You do end up assassinating an emperor in a Skyrim.
Yes, that's
true.
true.
Which I don't believe is something that's happened by an Assassin's Guild since...
Riemann.
Yeah, Riemann.
Riemann the
way
Third,
back
yeah.
20 minutes ago.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it is significant, and I think that's probably, even though I really do prefer the Dark Brotherhood quest in Oblivion, I actually think the Dark Brotherhood quest in Skyrim stands out as better than a lot of the others.
Oh yeah, yeah. I like the way you join the Dark Brotherhood in Skyrim much more than Oblivion.
Oh well, the one in Oblivion is so weird. It's just so easy. At least the Dark Brotherhood in Skyrim makes some sense, and I actually thought the character of Astrid was a really good addition.
Yeah.
To the story. She actually has a character and has, a personality. And that's really important to making these guilds feel authentic. And I think that's one of the reasons why the guilds stand out in Skyrim as some of the best, some of them at least, stand out as some of the best quest lines in there.
Mm-hmm.
And not that there aren't, there are issues we could, I'm sure you and I probably have some things to say about the Thieves Guild quest line.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
The Thieves Guild on decent terms with the Dark Brotherhood. They're not opposing guilds like some others.
That's true. They definitely don't. They don't agree, but they're on.
In Skyrim in particular, some of the members are seen working fairly closely with each other.
Yeah, I always thought that was interesting, and I think that what's the opposite of lend credence to? I think that
doesn't lead credence to.
Doesn't lead credence to, or throws a bit of a wrench into the idea that the Dark Brotherhood was a controversial and was a controversial splinter group of the Thieves Guild because the Thieves Guild didn't approve of their murder.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose they could have resolved their differences after a few hundred years. But based on what I know about the Elder Scrolls universe, it takes many hundreds of years to resolve any kinds of differences.
Yeah.
The diplomacy moves pretty slow in this universe, actually.
Yeah. Well, I mean, elves live a lot longer than humans anyway. So
exactly.
So I guess in most cases when elves are involved, maybe don't expect things to happen overnight.
And I think that's actually one of the most important points is that the differences between elves and humans is the age is a non-trivial difference. It's actually one of my things in fantasy in particular. It always bothers me when you have immortal characters and you never use the fact that they're immortal to do anything interesting.
Yeah. I mean, if you're immortal and you've got enemies, you can just wait until they die.
Exactly, yeah. Which I think is a cool dynamic, and I think one of the honestly, I may have my issues with ESO as a game, and even as a source of lore, but one of the things it does that I think is really interesting is it really emphasizes in the Aldmeri Dominion how the High Elves are really just quite distrustful of the races of men because of how young they are, and I think you can think of that. It's like for me and Andrew who are in our 20s, there's a lot of stuff we wouldn't trust to a 12-year-old
right
to do, and that's a very small scale example. But if you think of living as long as the elves do versus how long the races of men do, you can see how they might be kind of wary of the the wisdom of the races of men.
Mm-hmm.
It makes some you can, like you said earlier, if you know the reasoning, like with the Thalmor, then it makes a little more sense. They don't just come across as like wildly racist.
Yeah. Well, the Thalmor are wildly racist.
Well, they are, yeah, but it context improves it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I touched on the Black Sacrament. Do you want to speak on that a little bit? So the Black Sacrament is a way to, I guess, put a hit on somebody in terms that I guess most people would understand. It's a way to be heard directly by the Night Mother.
Yes, exactly.
So the ritual itself, so you get a heart, a skull, bones, and flesh of the individual you want to die, and then you speak a little ditty. You hear what's the kid's name in Skyrim?
Aventus?
Yeah, Aventus, there you go.
Yeah.
The first quest in Skyrim for the Dark Brotherhood, you go to Winterhold, and this kid is performing the Black Sacrament. But you get there before the Dark Brotherhood responds. And this might have to do with the fact that the Night Mother is currently in a coffin being driven around Skyrim.
Yeah. The communication of what's going on in the Black Sacrament has changed. like there's like I believe there's an idea that it was at once like a telepathic communication, like
Mhm.
from the Night Mother, but you know that but that changed with different Dark Brotherhood leadership, and sometimes they can't hear the Night Mother and just hear it through kind of word of mouth, which is a lot of there's a lot of ifs in terms of getting a black sacrament through word of mouth. Like I've heard some odd rumors just in my regular life. I don't know if I'd want to be killing people on the basis of word of mouth.
So the actual the plea, it's called, it's sweet mother, send your child unto me, for the sins of the unworthy must be baptized in blood and fear. And then supposedly the Night Mother hears that, and she tells a listener, who tells a speaker, and the speaker will send a Dark Brotherhood member out to answer the plea.
Yes, that's like the ideal way in which it works. And if you've never encountered the Dark Brotherhood and you're wondering what that damn quote is on the loading page that's there all the time, that's what it is. It's the words of the Black Sacrament.
Yeah. And I guess in a funny way, you could interpret it, the quest in Skyrim as the Night Mother or Sithis acting through you. Because since you answer the plea before any of the Dark Brotherhood members, since the Dark Brotherhood is currently in shambles, you could interpret it as, like I said, Sithis or the Night Mother acting through you by doing this quest. You could also interpret it as not that.
It's a great point, and that's actually my preferred interpretation of it. I think it's the most unifying. I think it ties the most knots. So I really like it. I like complicated lore, but at the end of the day, I like a lot. I like the cleanliness of some things, especially since in Elder Scrolls we so rarely get closure on anything.
Yeah.
Like we were saying, we having to tread our way around the creation myth at the beginning of this episode was quite difficult. Just given the kind of concepts you're dealing with, and I think that was that alludes to something we talked about last week when we said that the Elder Scrolls goes beyond some of the standard fantasy or supernatural settings that you might be familiar with, and really explores some complicated cosmological and existential stuff. And I think the creation myth and explored through the vehicle of talking about things like the Dark Brotherhood is one of the best examples of that. And yeah, that's most of what I wanted to say about these two guilds. Yeah,
I think I'm pretty okay too. Obviously, we could go for another hour. But
yeah, there's a whole
I don't think we're prepared to go that far right now.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned to bring up the Black Sacrament as well, because we had alluded to that, but we didn't actually say what it was. That's the kill order, basically.
Basically, yeah.
But yeah, so I hope that we've illuminated some things, and I hope that we've left you a little bit curious about the some of the stuff, especially that we talked about at the beginning, because we will be getting to that in a great deal more detail. The story is more complicated than it might seem at first.
Yes.
So yeah, we'll hopefully be back fairly soon. It was quite a long time between episodes. We had a number of delays due to real life circumstances that exist outside of this channel.
Yeah.
But
hey, next episode we might be in the same province again.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. We do this by over a sizable distance and a large body of water, actually. But that will probably be that will be changing very soon. And I'm not sure what we're gonna be. I guess we should carry on and make our way through the guilds now that we're on that path.
Yeah, we can probably tackle the Thieves Guild next, if that's something that interests you.
Yeah, I think that'd be the logical next topic. And like we say, we love the suggestions, and just because we are making our way through the essential information first, it doesn't mean we're not looking at them. We're looking at all of them, and we're going to be adding them to our master list. So if there's anything else you want to know about, or anything you would like to correct, even that we've said, feel free to drop a comment or post anywhere where we'll be watching it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So thanks for listening. And
that wraps up everything. Yeah. And we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah. Thanks.